Welcome back, history students. This is Chapter 20, Section 3, and we're going to discuss the final red subtitle, Eisenhower and the Republican Approach. All right, we have two presidential elections in 1952 and 1956, and we could talk about both elections because the same two people ran both times. So for the Democrats, we have Adlai Stevenson. He was a governor from Illinois, and you can see in the poster, he's the larger man in the center of the poster, and you can see these two little figures, FDR and Truman, and while he's campaigning, if Americans liked what happened during the FDR years, during the Truman years, then Stevenson would be your man. For the Republicans was Dwight Eisenhower. He was a general during World War II. He never held political office before running for president. In fact, the guy never even voted. He wasn't even a registered Democrat or Republican. Truman actually called Dwight Eisenhower and said, "Hey, why don't you run for the Democrats?" And Eisenhower's like, "No thanks, I do not feel like running for president." And then the next second he turns around and he's running for the Republicans. You'll also notice that Richard Nixon is his vice president running mate. So Richard Nixon is entering our Cold War history story a little early. Now Eisenhower, you can see the picture there. These are some of his campaign buttons, posters, and you can see he's using his World War II general image. But he had like a formula. It kind of looks like a chemistry formula, K1C2, and it stands for Korea, communism, and corruption. Eisenhower said, "If you elect me, I will end the Korean War. If you elect me, I will be tough on communism. If you elect me, I will get rid of corruption in the federal government." Now, there was a little hiccup during the first campaign, the 1952 presidential election, and you see on the screen, that is Richard Nixon, the vice president running mate for Dwight Eisenhower. He gets accused of accepting illegal gifts from campaign money. Today's presidential candidates, just like in the past, they raise money for campaigns, to buy those TV ads, to put signs in yards, flags on flagpoles. And so he was accused of using that money for personal use. It may surprise you, Nixon actually was innocent. He did not use campaign money for personal use. So Eisenhower decided to let Nixon bail himself out from this accusation. So Nixon goes on TV. That is a TV screen there, and that is a picture from his speech. And he's on TV and he's pleading his innocence to the American audience. He does mention in his speech that he did accept one political gift. There's a story. He was on campaign for Eisenhower. He mentioned that his daughters wanted a puppy, and one of the campaign donors did send Mr. Nixon a puppy. He accepted the puppy. The daughters fell in love with the puppy. They named the puppy Checkers. That's why it's called the Checkers speech, because he's not giving the dog back. He said, "That is the only thing I accepted was this dog, and it's named Checkers, and he's part of the family, and we are just not giving the dog back." Now, at the end of the speech, he asked Americans to state whether he should stay as the VP running, for election, or should he go? Should he get off the ballot? So Americans called and wired the Republican National Committee, and they all unanimously told Richard Nixon to stay on the ballot. So Richard Nixon will still run as Eisenhower's vice president. Now here's this lovely basic civics knowledge every American should know. I want you guys to be true Americans. So when is the president elected? It's every 4 years. You guys already knew that. But how do they decide when is this election? It's always on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So if, Tuesday is November 1st, you'll never have a presidential election on November 1st because there wasn't a November day before November 1st. Okay, so it's always the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Now, how long can a person serve as president? They can serve 2 terms, elected 2 terms, or they can serve a maximum of 10 years. Remember, we talked about this when we talked about the 22nd Amendment. Remember, the 10-year thing, that has to do when something happens to the president and the vice president has to step in. And if the vice president just serves the last 2 years of the president's term, they can run for election 2 times. But if they, like Truman, took over as president towards the beginning of the 4 years, like I think FDR was only president for like a month, and then Harry Truman became the new president. Well, Harry served most of those 4 years. So Harry could run 1 time, which he did in 1948, and in 1952 he decided not to run. And so that's where you can only have 10 years maximum. You can't go over those 10 years. So let's take a look at the 1952 election results. You'll see that Eisenhower definitely grabbed the popular vote. He had 55% of the popular vote. Electoral College, he had 442 electoral votes. So he definitely kicked Stevenson's butt. I wonder how well Eisenhower did in 1956 against Stevenson. Did he do better or did he do worse? Because he looks like he did a pretty good job here in 1952. Ooh, here's 1956. He really kicked Stevenson's butt. He got 57.5% of the popular vote, and he got even more electoral votes this time, 457. So Americans definitely like Eisenhower. He was very, very, very popular. Now, Eisenhower and modern republicanism, this is a vocabulary word. So basically what modern republicanism means, Eisenhower was conservative when it came to money, so spending. He didn't feel that the federal government should spend a lot of money on this program, that program, but he was liberal when it comes to humans. And so if there was a bill that actually helped the average American, he had a soft spot for the citizens of the United States, so he would actually support those kinds of bills. Eisenhower also favored big business because he understood that businesses generate jobs, and when people have jobs, they spend money, which helps the economy to grow. He also, though, tried to balance that federal budget. Remember, he's a modern Republican. He's very conservative when it comes to the federal government spending money. So he kept trying to balance the federal budget. He didn't think that the federal government should spend more money than it brings in. Now, Eisenhower also faced a technology challenge with the Soviets. I hope you remember that in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik. And that was the one Soviet feat that really Americans were like, wow, we're really far behind in technology. The Soviets had better missile technology. So Eisenhower's like, we need to do something about it. So he authorized the creation of NASA, and it was created in 1958. So it was right after Sputnik, to explore space, to develop missile technology. He really felt, and he was right, we could compete with the Soviets, we just needed to put our minds to it. Another thing that Congress passed and Eisenhower signed into law was the National Defense Education Act, and it was passed in 1958. And basically, it has to do with school, guys, so this would have to do with you if you were in public school back in 1958 and the 60s. And the 2 subjects that this act really wanted public schools to focus on was science and math, and that makes sense. because you need a lot of science and math in order to launch a missile into space. This concludes our lecture on 20-3, and I will see you tomorrow.